Good morning and welcome to Business Live on this Thursday. We've got a special programme today, expecting to hear from the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, to give a statement in the Commons. Any moment now, actually. Of course, we're going to hear from him following President Trump's announcement on those US tariffs for countries around the world, including here in the UK, with us being hit with a 10% tariff. Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue, who is live for us in Westminster. Ali, very good morning to you. Somewhat relief in government this morning, given the fact that it is not quite as bad as it could have been, but also clearly quite a lot of concern too.
Yeah, that's right. And the message from Jonathan Reynolds this morning is he will not say if he thinks Donald Trump's tariffs will cause a global recession. But look, he wouldn't be addressing Parliament this morning if he wasn't taking this seriously, if he didn't think there was a genuine threat to the UK economy here. And he, of course, has been busy on a charm offensive in the last couple of weeks, trying to secure some kind of deal, some kind of carve out for the UK when it comes to tariffs. He was in Washington in the last couple of weeks. He is not there right now. He's in the UK, so he's not heading there to try to finalise some kind of emergency deal. But the question now, I think, and his message is, as he puts it, the job is not done on a deal. But with 90 plus countries on this list, how far down the line is UK going to be when it comes to trying to secure some kind of carve out? And we know as well that there's sticking points around things like the digital services tax. Is that something the UK could offer to the US to try to please Donald Trump? How would that go down here in the UK if we saw taxes on big tech companies being reduced? As you say, in terms of the tone that we've seen from the government and the business secretary this morning, I think what they want, what they at least want us to think, whether or not is really what they're thinking, is that this is in a sense a vindication, a sigh of relief, because we are on the baseline 10% tariffs. That's half the 20% that the EU are going to receive. The Prime Minister's statement this morning, talking about the need for a calm head, say that he'll act in Britain's best interest. But he does say that clearly there will be an economic impact. So I think that is the sort of tone that we're going to hear now from Johnny Reynolds. As I say, he wouldn't be here if he wasn't taking this seriously, if there wasn't going to be a potential impact on GDP. We know that the Chancellor has a slim amount of headroom, that £9.9 billion that she's left herself, exactly the same number that she previously left herself before it was quickly wiped out and she had to come back for more cuts, including, of course, those controversial welfare cuts. So the government today will obviously be looking to what's happening in the US and the extremely real threat that that poses to the very small amount of wiggle room that the Chancellor has given herself, and be thinking about the fact that they may well have to come back for more tax rises in the autumn. Or what is this going to mean for the Chancellor's fiscal rules that she is so closely trying to stick to? He was asked about that, Jonathan Reynolds, this morning, and he said that she was not going to waver from her fiscal rules. Is that a line that is going to stick in the coming months? We are just now, the day after these extraordinary words and images coming out of the US, Donald Trump standing there in what felt like quite surreal moments with that big board of tariffs. Yes, we were down at the low end, with the baseline 10%, but we are, I think, in this country, in government certainly, still trying to digest exactly what that means, exactly whether or not these tariffs are going to stick, whether there will be some form of carve-out. There is so much economics here, but there is also politics too, and whether or not this is a business secretary that, as hard as he's been working to try to build bridges with the US, is going to be able to manage to secure some kind of carve-out.
We're expecting Jonathan Reynolds to speak at any moment now in the Commons. But let's bring in who is also alongside you, Ali, Paul Kelso, our business and economics correspondent. And Paul, the question, of course, is that this is going to have a clear impact on British business, and some of it quite immediate and some of it quite potent, i.e. on our car industry.
Yes, the car industry, the most exposed to exports to the United States and these tariffs, alongside potentially the pharmaceutical industry. Those two sectors between them are the biggest exporting sectors to the United States. They vie for the number one status. 2023 numbers, nearly £7 billion of car exports to the UK, particularly the high-end brands for which the UK still has a reputation for making well and attractively to consumers, albeit that none of them are owned by British companies anymore. Pharmaceuticals, there is a clause in this executive order which talks about, for now, pharmaceuticals being excluded. We did nearly £12 billion worth of exports in 2023 there. So the first order impact of this, if you are trying to export a car to the United States, is really, really significant. 25% on cars. Anything else you're exporting is about to get 10% more expensive, and that obviously carries a cost to the consumer buying it at the other end. You can try and offset that as much as you can, absorb some of it, but the whole point of this is that imports from the UK and everywhere else in the world look less attractive to American consumers, and building and making those goods, particularly goods in the US, looks more attractive to the companies that are hit. There's a secondary effect, and one quite beyond the overall impact on the global economy of the biggest trading nation and the richest nation on the planet deciding to erect financial barriers to doing business with literally everybody else, including unpopulated islands. That is bound to, the UK cannot avoid that. But there's the question about what to do when it comes to retaliation. Should the UK hit back with its own 10% tariffs immediately, for example? Well, the UK, Ali mentioned it there, got quite limited options. It's been talking about a deal in which the digital services tax, which affects the US tech companies, gives it a bit of leverage. But I spoke to a very senior minister just before the US election and about this issue of looming tariffs if Trump won, and they were pretty clear. They spoke with some candour. They said, as a small nation outside a major trading bloc, getting involved in a trade war just doesn't make a lot of sense. And that is true. Some people celebrating the fact the UK is facing 10%, not 20% like the EU. Well, why is the EU facing a bigger whack from Donald Trump? It's because it's more powerful. It's a bigger trading bloc. It's got more leverage. The UK simply doesn't have that. And there's a concern that if there is to be retaliation from other blocs like the EU, China, Canada and the like, and the UK tries to remain neutral and stick to this ground it's on currently, that could make the UK an attractive place to dump cheap goods that can't be sold elsewhere. So with the biggest steel supplier and stockist in the UK yesterday, that's their big fear, that if steel is got a tariff whacked on it in every other market, a place to dump it with no tariffs, cheap place to sell the steel could be the UK, and that would undermine their business plans, which are based around steel they've already bought at more expensive prices. So this is fiercely complex. Different sectors will be affected in different ways. None of it is positive, and it does leave the business secretary, when he stands up, when he gets to the Commons in a few moments' time, we hope, trying to walk a tightrope, because he's got those different interests to defend. He is trying to pursue a deal with the United States that they have accepted a few days ago was never going to happen before this big bang, Donald Trump's tariff game show host moment in the Rose Garden yesterday. What they hope to do is pick it up afterwards and try and offer the US some benefits that will offer the UK some carve-outs from these tariffs when the time comes. But he's got a business sector that on the whole so far is supporting him. The CBI is even using the same language, talking about remaining cool and calm. But if we think about the manufacturing industry, as this is goods that are most fundamentally affected, Make UK, which represents them, have make no bones. They say this is devastating for UK manufacturing. They say volumes will decline and it will destroy supply chains. So this really is really difficult, and the UK to try and find a path which gives itself the best chance of doing some kind of deal with the US while defending the interests of its businesses and those sectors which still do have some appeal globally and ultimately are going to be the ones that help deliver Labour's growth agenda, well, that is fiercely difficult. And there are probably limits to what the UK can do, given our scale and given that decision to leave the European Union, which some are casting as a positive this morning because we're on a lower rate, but we are outside the main action here, which is going to be between the big trading blocs trying to work out how they can do a deal with Donald Trump's America.
And Paul, we're looking at the markets this morning, and you know the FTSE is down more than 1%. The Stock 600, which is a pretty good measure of what's happening in Europe, is down nearly 2%. And as you say, there are individual sectors that are impacted by this. I mean, I'm looking at Adidas, which are down more than 10%. Make a lot of shoes that get sold in the United States. Maersk, the freight company, down over 8%. So the market's clearly not reacting well. We're expecting quite similar when the US markets open in a couple of hours' time. But it is a reminder about this will lead to lots of also unintended consequences when it comes to global trade. I mean, you only have to think back to when tariffs were imposed on China in his first term. Lots of the manufacturing bases actually moved to places like Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, who've now been whacked with some of the highest tariffs in the world.
Absolutely, and I mean that's a really good example. The those three countries you mentioned, plus China, that's nearly 30% of US consumer goods come from those countries, and companies took their business, exactly right, to Vietnam, Cambodia and the like to avoid tariffs, and they're now facing 49% on Cambodian produced goods. And you mentioned the markets. What's interesting there is that the broad indices of cross-sectoral big companies, they're all down because they anticipate this negative impact on global growth and, frankly, ongoing uncertainty, even while they might celebrate the fact they at least know what the numbers are from the White House, although no one's yet quite clear how on earth they were worked out. But some of the individual sectors, you mentioned there, Adidas, and Nike was on the slide yesterday evening too after this in its pre-opening trading. Clothing, apparel, as the Americans describe it, is really interesting because that has been offshored. Vietnam is. You look at your next time you go for a run or go to the gym. Look at the shirt you pull on. It's made in Vietnam. Huge amounts of manufacturing done in Asia. A great deal of time spent establishing those supply chains. Quite a bit of political heat around the conditions in which those goods are made. Why are they made there? They're made there because it is cheaper, even if you aspire to the very highest standards of labour rights, which all those companies will tell us they do, it's still massively cheaper. So reshoring those to the US, if Nike is going to make all its trainers and all its goods in the US, it's inflationary. There's no way round that. So it's quite interesting to see some of those sectors that, even if they're not apparently always immediately obvious to us, those who are invested in those companies are absolutely clear where they think it will fall.
OK. Paul, great stuff as always. Stay where you are. Thank you very much for the moment. Interesting we're getting, of course, interesting reaction from across Europe this morning as well. Germany liking the tariffs that have been posed to the challenge of the Ukraine war, and the French foreign minister in the last couple of minutes saying that actually it will hurt the US economic impact, will have an impact on defence spending here in Europe. But let's just have a recap, a reminder, if you like, of what the US president had to say in the Rose Garden last night as he announced those tariffs.
This is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. We're going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen. We have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often, and for many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple, can't get any simpler than that. This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly. With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again, greater than ever before. So, if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here, we didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less, so how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly, they rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades, and it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China and charged them. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs. And they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand. And the other countries, and they all understand. We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe, but they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it. Like United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. We're going to build our future with American hands, with American heart, American steel, and we're going to build it with American pride like we used to. We're approaching our 100th day as president and have been given credit by a lot of people, actually, even some of the fake news. Can you believe it? Which in this case, hopefully, isn't fake, for having done more in that time than any other administration in the history of our country in the first 100 days. I think we've had an amazing in terms of what we've done, what we've gotten accomplished.
We're just going to step away from tariffs and the global economy, just to bring you up to date with some breaking news coming in from West Midlands Police, and that is that the M5 is currently closed in both directions. The police are saying that they are at the scene of 2 incidents on the M5 and it is currently closed. It's shut junction 3 at Quinton and at junction 2 at Albury after a body was found on the carriageway. follows a separate collision that's short northbound between Junction 3 and the M6. So breaking news from the West Midlands, the M5 currently closed in both directions after a body was found on that motorway. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we are going to be in the Commons where, it looks like, in fact, I'm going to not take the break because it looks like Jonathan Reynolds might be about to take to his feet. And we've heard from, of course, the Prime Minister this morning saying clearly there will be an economic impact from the 10% tariff on the UK. Let's have a listen in to what the Business Secretary has to say.
On the United Kingdom's economic relationship with the United States. The UK has a strong and balanced trading relationship with the US, worth £315 billion, which supports over 2.5 million jobs across both our countries. This is second only to the EU, where our trading relationship is worth £791 billion. Yesterday evening, the United States announced a 10% reciprocal tariff on UK exports and have today imposed a 25% global tariff on cars. This follows the application of tariffs of 25% on US imports of steel, aluminium and derivative products that was announced on the 12th of March. No country was able to secure an exemption from these announcements, but the UK did receive the lowest reciprocal tariff rate globally. And though this vindicates the pragmatic approach this government has taken, we know that while these tariffs are still being levied, the job is far from done. We are, of course, disappointed by the increase in tariffs on the UK and on other countries around the world. The impact will be felt amongst all trading nations. But I would like to update the House on how the UK can navigate these turbulent times, acting in our national interest and for the benefit of all our industries. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my American counterparts, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, US Trade Representative Jameson Greer, and Special Envoy Mark Burnett for their engagement over the last few months. While any imposition of tariffs is deeply regrettable, from the beginning they promised to make themselves available and have been true to their word. And I look forward to our continued engagement over the days ahead. As members will know, since the new US administration took office, my colleagues and I have been engaged in intensive discussions on an economic deal between the US and the UK. One that would not just avoid the imposition of significant tariffs, but that would deepen our economic relationship. On everything from defence, economic security, financial services, machinery, tech and regulation, there are clear synergies between the US and UK markets. And this is reflected in the fair and balanced trading relationship that already exists between our two countries. I can confirm to the House that those talks are ongoing and will remain so. It is this government's view that a deal is not just possible, it is favourable to both countries, and that this course of action serves Britain's interests as an open-facing trading nation. I've been in contact with many businesses across a broad range of sectors, including those most affected, who have very much welcomed this approach. It is clear to me that industry themselves want to grasp the opportunity a deal can offer, and they welcome this government's cool-headed approach. Madam Deputy Speaker, in increasingly insecure times, I have heard some members cling to the security of simple answers and loud voices. I understand the compulsion, but I caution members of this House to keep calm and remain clear-eyed on what is in our national interest, not to simply proclaim that we follow the actions of other countries. The British people rightly expect this government to keep our country secure at home and abroad. An unnecessary, escalating trade war would serve neither purpose. True strength comes in making the right choices at the right time. And thanks to the actions of our Prime Minister, who has restored Britain's place on the world stage, the UK is in a unique position to do a deal where we can and respond when we must. It remains our belief that the best route to economic stability for working people is a negotiated deal with the US that builds on our shared strengths. However, we do reserve the right to take any action we deem necessary if a deal is not secured. To enable the UK to have every option open to us in future, I am today launching a request for input on the implications for British businesses of possible retaliatory action. This is a formal step necessary for us to keep all options on the table. We will seek the views of UK stakeholders over 4 weeks until the 1st of May 2025 on products that could potentially be included in any UK tariff response. This exercise will also give businesses the chance to have their say and influence the design of any possible UK action. If we are in a position to agree an economic deal with the US that lifts the tariffs that have been placed on our industries, this request for input will be paused, and any measures flowing from that will be lifted. Further information on the request for input will be published on gov.uk later today, alongside an indicative list of potential products that the government considers most appropriate for inclusion. I know this will be an anxious time for all businesses, not just those with direct trade links to America. And let me say very clearly that we stand ready to support businesses through this. That starts by making sure they have reliable information. And any business which is concerned about what these changes mean for them can find clear guidance and support on great.gov.uk, where there is now a bespoke web page. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government was elected to bring security back to working people's lives. And at a time of volatility, businesses and workers alike are looking to the government to keep our heads, to act in our national interest, and to navigate Britain through this period. And while some urge escalation, I simply will not play politics with people's jobs. Yeah. This government will strive for a deal that supports our industries and the well-paid jobs that come with them, while preparing our trade defences and keeping all options on the table. It is the right approach to defend the UK's domestic industries from the direct and indirect impacts of US tariffs in a way which is both measured and proportionate, while respecting the rules-based international trading system. As the world continues to change around us, British workers and businesses can be assured of one constant, and that this is a government that will not be set off course in choppy waters. So the final part of our approach will be to turbo boost the work this government is doing to make our economy stronger and more secure, including our new industrial strategy. And we will strike trade deals with our partners and work closely with our allies for our shared prosperity. We have a clear destination to deliver that economic security for working people. We're progressing a deal that can do that. We're laying the foundations to move quickly, should it not. And we're ensuring British business have a clear voice in what happens next. And I commend this statement to the House.
Yeah. For the Shadow Secretary of State, Andrew Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. Businesses, workers and their families woke up this morning with greater fear and more uncertainty about their future. Tariffs makes us all poorer by pushing up costs, suppressing demand and making the pound in our pocket buy less of the things that we need. It's free trade to which we owe our past prosperity, and free trade which has lifted billions out of poverty since the Second World War. So this is a moment for calm words and cool heads, and we will support the government when it does sensible things to reverse the impact on our already fragile economy. I'm glad the government has recommitted to reaching a deal with our closest ally and largest single-country trading partner. But this is also a moment for honesty and telling the truth. The government sadly got no special favours from the White House last night. The Secretary of State refers to vindication. This is no vindication at all. We're in precisely the same band as the Congo, Costa Rica, Kosovo and the Christmas Islands. In fact, I count over 125 countries and territories that have the same tariff levels as the US as we now do. So not that special. Our automotive manufacturers face unchanged tariffs of 25% on around £8 billion worth of cars and auto part exports. Steel and aluminium exports remain at 25%. And on a volume-weighted basis, our exports face an average tariff of closer to 13%. Above all, last night was a vindication of those who were pilloried and abused for wanting our country to have the freedom to decide our own trade policy. If Labour and the Liberal Democrats had their way, we'd still be in the EU. As the Prime Minister acknowledged this morning, thousands of British jobs have been saved today as the result. And I hope the Right Honourable Gentleman and his colleagues had the decency to regret the 48 times they voted to stay in Europe and to thank us for getting Brexit done. Madam Deputy Speaker, last week, the OBR warned that these tariffs could knock up to 1% off GDP. We're already in a per capita recession and markets are falling this morning. It's businesses that create jobs and grow our economy. Yet at every turn, the government has piled on headwinds when they need our support. They've put a tax on jobs, more than doubled business rates for many, introduced the family business death tax and are barrelling ahead with flawed recycling charges. No wonder business confidence remains at rock bottom. To help British exporters survive, they must urgently tackle our sky-high energy costs. A business in Birmingham, the West Midlands, faces energy costs 4 times their competitor in Birmingham, Alabama, in the US. That dwarfs the impact of tariffs and is no basis on which to compete. The Secretary of State himself is responsible for the Employment Rights Bill. It'll hit businesses so hard, the OBR has not even begun to assess how much it will hurt the economy. So now is the time, today is the day. In the national interest, the Secretary of State must walk back to his department and instruct his officials, shelve the Employment Rights Bill today. Put ideology aside, put the unions on hold and put the government on the side of British business. The cost of failure is too high. The burdens on business are too great. Time is too precious. He must act and act fast. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me conclude with some questions to the Secretary of State on behalf of all of our constituents. Will he publish an urgent assessment of the impact of today's tariffs on the UK economy so markets can see whether the Chancellor's emergency budget sums still add up or she'll be back for more taxes? When will he give the car makers the clarity they need on the ZEV mandate? Will he undertake to keep Parliament informed and to publish the UK's broader objectives, not negotiating strategy, but the broader objectives in these trade negotiations with the US, precisely as the previous government did in March 2020? Will he assure us that any deal will back British farmers and food producers and uphold our high environmental protection and the animal welfare standards which we ourselves enhanced since leaving the EU and upheld in the agreements we reached? Will he now surge additional resources for exporters, reallocating resources across government to fund a new version of the UK trade show programme and enlarging the GREAT campaign? What consideration is the government giving to the special situation of Northern Ireland? Will he guarantee that all claims under the duty reimbursement scheme for Northern Ireland will be paid promptly and the government will commit additional resources when required? Can he reassure us that in the event the UK did see a major trade distortion in Northern Ireland, the government would be prepared, if necessary, to trigger Article 16 of the Windsor Framework? Will he reassure the House that any concessions to UK tech giants on the digital services tax won't simply shift the burden to the United Kingdom small businesses? Madam Deputy Speaker, on this side of the House, we are on the side of business and on the side of Britain. We understand the gravity of this situation. We will support the government where it acts in the national interests. I hope they will take this moment seriously, get back round the table with their US counterparts and involve the House in their deliberations.